Hello, BookTube. Welcome back. I'm the Rambling Raconteur, Jack. And I just first of all wanted to say thank you to everybody who's been subscribing to the channel. I know a few of you are my friends and family, but there's some people I've never met, and I think that's really amazing that you're interested in anything I have to say. Hopefully I don't ramble too much. Like I had said in a previous one of the aspects of literature that I absolutely love and adore are short stories. I love to read short stories. I started reading short stories primarily in college because there were a couple of writers that I was interested in through various different connections, some science fiction writers especially, and I found out really the only thing they wrote were short stories. So that was sort of my first exposure to reading short fiction. And then as I entered my late 20s and then my 30s, I was having more time at work. I was having, a lot more time with my family, especially when I became a father. And I would find I don't have time to read. And, certainly not to read a long novel or a long work of history, some of the things I really enjoy. And so instead of trying to read 20 or 30 pages a day and require nearly a month to finish a book, what I might do was instead dip into a short story, read a short story, or read an essay or an article, read a little bit of poetry. And so that's part of why I want to make a few of these videos around short stories. Is I really believe that, so many people, despite all of our modern conveniences, so many people feel we don't have the time to read. And you know what? I don't want to judge anybody's life. You don't have the time to read a book. What you might have time to do, though, is to read a short story. And I think if we can understand how to appreciate short stories, if we can dig in and discover the jewels that lie within short stories, we all have a chance to read a little bit more and to appreciate maybe a different aspect of literature, or to get some perspective on why we really appreciate some of the books or texts that we really do love. And so a short story that I'm going to highlight in this video is by Katherine Mansfield, a writer from the 1910s and very early 1920s, who was originally from New Zealand but did much of her writing in London or traveling throughout Europe, going to various different environments, in part because she had been diagnosed with tuberculosis and was trying to seek a cure for that. Sadly, there was no cure, and she ended up passing away at a fairly young age in the early to mid 1920s. The story of hers that I'd like to discuss today is a short story called Bliss. Part of the reason is because it's one of my probably three favorite stories of Katherine Mansfield's, but it's also the title of that story was used as the title for one of her volumes of short stories. So if you're looking for a volume of stories and you don't see her collected stories, you might find a volume that's just titled Bliss, and you'd be more likely to remember it. And so she was a contemporary of and sort of part of the same circle as writers like D.H. Lawrence or Virginia Woolf, and but really just focused on short stories. D.H. Lawrence is a master of the short story as well, but Katherine Mansfield pretty much strictly was writing short stories. So I want to start by reading just the first couple paragraphs of Bliss, because I think it shows what makes Mansfield a good short story writer and why this particular story is a good story. Although Bertha Young was 30, she still had moments like this, when she wanted to run instead of walk, to take dancing steps on and off the pavement, to bowl a hoop, to throw something up in the air and catch it again, or to stand still and laugh at nothing simply. What can you do if you're 30 and turning the corner of your own street you are overcome suddenly by a feeling of bliss, absolute bliss, as though you'd suddenly swallowed a bright piece of that late afternoon sun and it burned in your bosom, sending out a little shower of sparks into every particle, into every finger and toe? Oh, is there no way you can express it without being drunk and disorderly? How idiotic civilization is. Why be given a body if you have to keep it shut up in a case like a rare, rare fiddle? No, that about the fiddle is not quite what I mean, she thought, running up the steps and feeling in her bag for the key. She'd forgotten it, as usual, and rattling the letterbox. It's not what I mean because, thank you, Mary. She went into the hall. Is Nurse back? And so we see in those first few paragraphs, again, we see how this story is driving its title, and Mansfield has really done an excellent job of taking us into this character. In not even half a page of writing, we've been sucked into a character. We have ideas around what she's thinking, and they are universal experiences, but they're specific experiences within the universal human experience. Mansfield gives us very clear moments that this character Bertha Young is experiencing, what she wants to do, and they're very specific desires she has, but they're desires that, as an adult, if we were to take a chance and do something like that, people would look at you and be like, what's wrong with that person? Did that person have too much to drink, or is that person using, on something? There would be a concern about our mental state, because we so often aren't allowed to express ourselves. We aren't expected to move outside of the institutional inertia that society is setting up around us. And what Mansfield is going to explore in this story is a character who, for that one day, experiences this sense of bliss, this desire to sort of break free and discover something new about herself. And throughout the story, it then leads to a sort of an encounter with the nanny that she and her husband have for their little baby, and some friction that exists there. There's a small dinner party with a couple of other characters, including Bertha's husband. And then ultimately, one of the guests she's invited, she seems to sense that character too has sensed this deep just joy or bliss, and it's almost a peaceful joy. It's this realization of, maybe I don't have to be everything that is expected around me. Maybe there are other opportunities, and there's a sense of excitement that comes along with it. It's not a fearful sense of the unknown, it's this excited sense of the unknown. And I think in part because it's, even though the future can be unknown, perhaps it's that we recognize for the first time knowing that we want something else. And so Mansfield really shapes all this. It's a very short story. It's 14 pages. It takes, even for someone who's having to take the time to sit down and read it in parts, it wouldn't take more than 20 or 30 minutes to read, which is sometimes all we have time for. And so Bliss by Katherine Mansfield, one of the beautiful pieces of a short story is that because they're so short, the authors have to sort of wrap you up real quick, take you into this story, and then there's a trajectory. It's like an aircraft. It takes off, it goes, and then it lands. And it's a very short flight. There are no drinks served. There's no time for snacks. And Mansfield appreciates this. There's a level of irony within this story, specifically, that I want to discuss. And it links back to the previous video I'd done in The Darling by Anton Chekhov. Mansfield actually references Bertha as feeling as if she's sort of interacting with characters in a Chekhov play. And I do think there was some influence between Chekhov's stories towards Mansfield's stories, sort of in the next generation of writers. And that's that deep appreciation for characters, the characters who the reader initially thinks the writer is sort of patronizing the character. Not necessarily. For example, the first level of irony is that Bertha seems to be experiencing joy and bliss around a level of nothingness. There's a slight twist in it where a character she has an opinion about, she later discovers something about that character that she doesn't really like. It very much shifts her perspective on that character. And so there's this irony of, like, you can't really get anybody else's mind. You can't really find the bliss. Like, what is it that Bertha is really happy about? What is she really exploring? Is it worth anything? And so that there seems to be that surface level of irony. But I really believe Mansfield has this deeper level of irony with it, and it's an irony that's sort of on the reader. So as you're reading it, the reader is forming this ironic opinion about Bertha Young, about the main character, and thinking, like, what's the deal with, is she really that intelligent? Does she really have much going on? But let's remember, this is the character who's realized that, in those first couple pages, why can civilization be so idiotic? And there's a level of irony on us as readers that, wait a second, this character who we might want to patronize and sort of view and look askance at and dismiss has recognized an aspect of our own lives that maybe we need to reflect on and appreciate in a different way. And so I want to leave end this video. I want to leave with another text that this links to that's not a short story, and I have absolutely no evidence that Mansfield ever read this, but it sort of deals with that same theme of questioning, the institutional inertia, sort of the power of society or civilization to constrict around a person and questioning its value. And that is, it's a very tiny little volume called The Supplement to the Voyage of Bougainville, which had been published in the 1700s. And Denis Diderot, one of the Age of Reason Enlightenment thinkers in France, helped form the encyclopedia. He wrote this sort of almost like a pamphlet called The Supplement to the narrative of that voyage, in which he shows dialogues between an almoner who's on this voyage, who's interacting with islanders in Tahiti, and initially the almoner is questioning everything about their society, everything about their civilization, and the other person, the Tahitian villager within that dialogue, sort of turns those questions back to the almoner and questions, the French bourgeois aristocratic civilization, and really wonders, like, why do you have to have all these rules? Why do you have to have all of these ideas within your civilization, and then you don't enforce any of them? Like, you're all sort of hypocrites. And it sort of gets to those same ideas that Mansfield is using in approaching in her story Bliss, but it does it through this idea of a dialogue between a Tahitian villager and a French sort of upper middle class character who's on this voyage, interacting there in Tahiti. And so that's The Supplement to the Voyage of Bougainville by Diderot. I don't actually have a copy of that. I have it in the Viking Portable Age of Reason reader, and I think, though, it's available on Project Gutenberg or somewhere like that. Surprisingly, Penguin Classics never did a volume of Diderot that included that entire text. But that, again, is Bliss by Katherine Mansfield. I highly recommend Mansfield as a short story writer, especially if you're somebody who's thought about either reading more of or trying to read Virginia Woolf or D.H. Lawrence. Mansfield might be a great way to introduce yourself to that before you take on a longer work, a longer novel. Mansfield stories might be a great way to introduce yourself to that. So I'll be back hopefully with perhaps a Greek tragedy or something different as we move forward. But thank you again, everyone. Bye.